Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to another episode of A Lost Plot. I am your host, Maverick, here with our wonderful guest, Avalon. Avalon, thanks for coming.
Hello, hola, konnichiwa, and leho.
Now, today, we are going over a new release known as The Blind, released in 2023. This is the one written by Andrew Hyatt and Stephanie Kotz, and directed by Andrew Hyatt. It's all about Phil Robertson, the real-life Duck Dynasty guy, and his life with his family. So it's a little bit, it's a drama for sure. It's not necessarily in the main purview of what we normally review, but this is definitely still in the category, especially as it's about his personal growth and development in his life. Anyways, it's got Aaron Von Andrian as Phil Robertson, Amelia Eve as Kay Robertson, Aaron Dalla Villa as Cy Robertson, Connor Tillman as Big Al Bolin, and the rest. But anyways, Avalon, if you want to get into what this movie is about.
Yeah, so The Blind is about Phil Robertson's, I guess, early life as a young man. First as a child in his family, and then as he goes to high school, and then as a young man, tried to make it in the world. And just him, the struggles he goes through, trying to follow his passions, what he wants to do, while also trying to be a father and a husband.
Yeah. So out of 9, I gave it a 6.25.
6.25?
I think it's got some good things going for it, some definite weaknesses that it could improve on, but we'll definitely get into why that's the case. And would you strike that with?
My score ended up being 5.2.
Wow, Mr. Man is getting harsh on them. That's good. That's good.
I just I tallying up my points. I'm like, oh, interesting.
Yeah. That's
Right.
well, let's get into it. So you have the opener, right? Let's just compare these 2 real quick. I gave it a 6.25. He gives it what, a 5.2?
2.
I'm not even sure how you got to that number in the rating system, but that's awesome. We'll get into that. The yeah. Anyways, so let's get into the plot. The opening of the movie was one where you have the character of Phil Robertson at home, his mother, who I believe is mentally unstable, to say the least, is a point of drama for the family's life. In regards to an opener for the movie, was this one that caught your attention and made you want to keep watching? And that would include beyond just that opening scene, but also like him beginning to grow up.
It was interesting. I'll give it that. It was a very interesting opening. I don't know if it compelled me to keep watching. Like, for example, if as an example, say this question, this very this point on your point scale thing. Like, say you are going through the store and you have those TVs playing movies.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, you're going on, and if this movie was playing and you're seeing the first few minutes of this movie, is this something like what I'm seeing? Is it going to make me stop and keep watching? Or is it something I'm just going to go oh, that's interesting, and keep passing by?
If you're at the deceased
or
movie place Fry's,
am I
and you see it playing on a TV screen, are you going to stop shopping for hard drives and watch it? And you would say probably not.
There's several different reactions. You could either completely ignore it, oh, whatever. It might catch your attention and it'll be memorable to your head, oh, that's interesting. But then you won't stop and keep watching. Or you'll be engaged, stop, oh, what's this? I think my reaction is the second one, oh, this is interesting, but I don't know if I would have stopped normally and stayed to keep watching this. So
that makes sense.
That would be my reaction. So it was kind of a mediocre opening. It wasn't a bad opening, just a mediocre opening.
And are you thinking of that specifically to the opener with the mom, or are you talking about that and everything else that precedes that?
I'm just thinking of everything in that opening sequence, everything that takes place in that opening, those few opening scenes.
Got it. So, yeah, I would say I would probably roughly agree with you on that point. I actually would say I would give it no points for the opener, and that the the first thing you see is the mother and the psychotic situation she's in, and that was interesting. I would say that that does have a good start, but after that, it's pretty slow for a good couple 20-30 minutes, I would say, as they develop the characters and show who they are and all that stuff. And
Mm-hmm.
that makes it very hard for it to pick up steam, especially as the movie itself is a rather slow descent, if you will, into the
Mm-hmm.
darker parts of Phil Robertson's life. Now, this
Yeah.
I will say, this movie is interesting because it's a telling of a true story, right? So it's not like you're gonna go, oh my goodness, well that we're gonna have something way more terrible happen than what actually happened, right? And so
Mm-hmm.
I'm not advocating in this podcast. One, we review primarily on the merits of the story, right, and how the story is told. So regardless of whether it's um true or not, I think you could still ask, is this a good story by itself? And secondly, you could also ask, could that same story be told in a way that would make it more effective at engaging the different aspects of the story? So this is nothing against the Robertsons. I remember watching Duck Dynasty for years. I'm happy, happy, happy. I get it. It's a good show. I think there's a good story to be told with Phil Robertson as a whole. The question is this story told in an engaging and intriguing way? So I just wanted to throw that out there. I think there is something to be said for telling lives, true stories, and you can gain a lot of value from that just as a baseline.
Oh yeah. No, I agree. I think a good biography or a good story, like a good retelling of actual events, like it's beneficial. Like it's good to look back at the past and like look at people's lives and
Mm-hmm.
such and learn from their mistakes and even learn about what they went
Right,
through.
exactly.
So there is benefit to that. In fact, you in some cases even more so than a fictional
Oh
story.
yeah,
So
and it's also and actually we'll get into this now, but the setting and the characters, there is a sense in which. So, would you say, before I just say what's on my mind, would you say that the setting is believable, or the rules of the universe make sense? That's a baseline thing for a lot of
yeah,
stories.
I mean, like, okay, you know what? Yeah, I gave it full
Mhm.
points on that because like this is a real world setting. It does feel like a place that it would actually exist. Like it doesn't feel like contrived. It doesn't feel
No,
fake. It's like okay, like completely all in all, like it may not have like a world that's like oh amazing, like Lord of the Rings or something. Like obviously you can't expect that, but it's like this feels real. It doesn't feel like a movie set or anything like that. So you had to give it full points for that. It's a simple thing.
no, and I would agree. I
So
think one of the things that a true story has going for it is exactly this: is that because it happened in real life, it's very easy or
hmm,
easier to recreate that scene in a believable way. And for us as an audience, it's a lot easier to connect and relate to that because we have some level of basic connection in our everyday lives to a real world setting. So when you see Phil
hmm,
Robertson out in the woods, or you see, someone fishing or someone hunting, or if you've ever engaged in any number of those things, it makes sense. It gets it.
hmm.
Whereas, if you're watching Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, and they're drinking with aliens in the middle of the side of a what looks like a beehive cantina. There's just very little relatable to that. So it's. I think there's a lot to be said for. There's a reason there are things like that. Is the setting believable? Obviously, it's our setting. It's our world, right?
You happy now? Like I didn't expect you to go on a rant just yet, but okay.
Okay, shut up. That was a pro rant too. Well, I guess I did bring Ant Man into it, so that got me going. Yeah. All right. So the main character, we have Phil Robertson. He's introduced. Would you say that he is a compelling character? Is he flawed in a way that you find him engaging? Just all of that good stuff.
I'd say yes. Like think over the course of the movie, they did show like his character, his motivations, his drive, more or less. He's kind of this simple guy in some cases where it's just like he just wants some basic things out of
Yeah.
life, but he also loves like the wild. He loves to hunt. He loves to fish. He likes, and even in a way, he wants to be a good father and a good husband. He does want those things. So it's like he's not like he might be a simple guy, but he's fully fleshed out. He's a fully like understandable, relatable
Mhm.
character. And it's like, and he has weaknesses. He has like flaws. He's not like, oh, some saint or anything. It's he has like he's fully rounded. So I felt like this was one of the strong points of the movie. Like he is a fully rounded character.
Yeah. No, and I would say even from the beginning with the child actor who I wasn't super impressed with, but even going on, they have the inklings and developments to make this someone who has strong motivations for where they're going, good basis for conflict, all of that kind of stuff. I definitely agree. I
Mm-hmm.
think they started him off pretty well. Now, would you say the same for the side characters and the supporting cast? Or at the very least, are they developed in a way where they have their own motives, their own needs, their own baseline for interacting in this world?
I would say the side characters are a mixed bag. Like some of them
Mm-hmm.
are, some of them are
Mm-hmm.
not. Like I would say characters like Miss K, Jan, and maybe even Big Al, like they all are more fully like they're more fully fleshed out as
Mm-hmm.
characters. Like you kind of get a feel for who they are, what they want, what they're doing, what their goals are. It's just like you get this bigger picture with each of them, like what they want out of
Mm-hmm.
life. And so they make sense. And then there's some characters like you don't know what they want. I mean, as you said, like, no offense to the Robertsons or anything like that, but the guy who played Cy in this movie, like it wasn't fully clear what Cy wanted in this story. Like he was kind of just there for humorous effect, like every scene he was in, or like as emotional support in some
Mm-hmm.
scenes.
Well, yeah, I mean, I
So,
would say he has a little more of a role to play, but your analysis of him in this movie is 100% correct. That he's not.
mhm.
He's sorry, Sai, you are a crutch. He's like the funniest part of Duck Dynasty, but yeah,
Mhm.
his character in this was clearly he. It was interesting because Sai as a character was clearly had some importance in the development of Phil throughout the story.
No, no, I'm not saying he wasn't important. I'm just saying as a character, like he wasn't fully
Mhm.
fleshed out. Like I guess like you could see his importance to the story, but as an individual character, like what was his goals? Like what was his motive? Like that wasn't fully realized.
Yeah,
Maybe that's what
yeah,
I was saying.
and I would say I agree with you that especially
Mm-hmm.
because he clearly had some important roles to play in the story, it was interesting that he
Mm-hmm.
wasn't developed more. So I think
Mm-hmm.
that that's a valid concern. That's one where I personally gave them half points on characters.
Mm-hmm.
I almost didn't give them any because there is I go back and forth on some of the characters like Big Al. Even though he is his own character,
Mm-hmm.
he did to some degree still feel a little stock. The
Yeah.
pastor, well, the pastor actually I thought was a little better than most of them. Jan I actually thought was more stock, but it was mostly Miss K and Phil, and those are the two most important characters. So to
Mm-hmm.
have those developed is good,
Yeah.
but when you have this whole grab bag of individuals who are involved in this story, it definitely helps to build the plot when you have multiple people well developed in the plot. Which is it's
Mm-hmm.
interesting because as I'm sure our audience will have listened to or will listen to the Hateful Eight, this is almost a there's a lot of things between these two movies that are flipped between each other in regards to um, values, character develop, yeah, the base or the backgrounds of characters being developed, the intensity of some of the scenes, and how they interact with individual characters versus characters having inner conflict, all that kind of stuff. There's a lot of very different things. These are not movies related in any sense, but all of that to say is there are elements that both did well, and they're in the uh, opposite camps. That's what I would say. once you know who these characters are, right? You have Phil Robertson,
Mm-hmm.
and he is someone who has a goal to build something of his life, but especially with the background of his mother and how there was
Mm-hmm.
pain there. He wants to
Mm-hmm.
build a life and a family that is not that, right? And he wants to be in charge of
Mm-hmm.
building a responsible family and a responsible life there. Do you think that there was enough? Like, is his life more or less over if he does not achieve
Like the way you phrase that just now is throwing me off.
it?
That's not how I was thinking of it before. Um, I want to say, in a way, yes, because his life is all about, uh, because he's trying to change
Mhm.
his life in a way. Like he has this goal, like of a certain life, his ideas. I guess because he doesn't want to be his mom. Like he doesn't want to be like what his family
Mhm.
was. Like he wants to do
Right.
something different. That's clear from the get go. So I would say, I might have to change my score on this one. But I wanted to say yes before, but I guess maybe I'll drop it down. Maybe say like it's maybe not as essential. Like I don't know. Like because I guess he could, but it would just be a miserable life.
Right. Well, and that's so. This is the thing. If he can't, he uh, so if he loses everything, can he go back to his
Mm-hmm.
life as it was before and everything be okay? Or is, for all intents and purposes, is his life over in an emotional sense if he doesn't achieve that?
Mm-hmm.
So it doesn't mean he has to physically die.
Yeah.
That's the important point.
Okay.
Just because
Yeah.
they do that
Mm-hmm.
in the Hateful Eight does not mean that every movie needs to have that.
Not every movie has to have people who
Yes.
die.
That's quite all right. So I, for myself, put that this was a yes. I think his goals in life are simple,
Mm-hmm.
and those are clearly
Mm-hmm.
played out. For him, it's very important that he not repeat the mistakes of his parents, but he also
Mm-hmm.
has the desires of the world, if you will, pulling at him to engage in all these other ways, and his own love for hunting that he wants to continue to engage in. And these things are making it conflicting for him to achieve that goal, but that
Mm-hmm.
doesn't mean that's not his goal. So I would say that
Yeah.
I would say that that was a yes for me. I think that he clearly has the goals in his life, and if he doesn't achieve those, he he's a wreck, and we actually see that
Mm-hmm.
in the movie. But
Mm-hmm.
now this is an interesting question. This is going next. Is in regards to an obstacle in the way of the main character. Is it compelling?
So I would
Mhm.
say yes. And that's because like I mean, there's no real villain in this movie. Let's just put that out there. Like, unless you count Big Al, but that's more like he's just a friend who's a
Yeah.
bad influence. He's not really like a villain
No.
per se. Um, so the reality is this obstacle is clearly the demons that Phil Robertson
Right.
struggles with, like his internal like problems, his inner darkness. Um, so it's like his struggle with alcoholism and his own selfish desires. So it's like he wants clearly like at a certain point you see he's trying to get everything he wants. He wants to be able to keep hunting. He wants to be able to hang out with his friends. He wants to be able to, but he also wants to hang out with his
Hmm.
family, like please his wife. But it's almost like he can't do all
Hmm.
of that, and it's like something has to give, and so it's like he's like, and so I guess in other ways it's his pride too, where it's like he's just like it. This is the big obstacle that it's very compelling. All of us have pride. All of us have things that we struggle with, demons or fears or whatnot, like things that just eat away at us. It will tear us apart if we don't give them up or overcome
Right.
them. So I would say that his struggle was a very compelling one, and it was actually portrayed in such a way that I think it was very like it was a very well portrayed
Hmm.
struggle.
How do I phrase? It's very interesting because this movie is very much all about his personal development, right? As a character,
Mm-hmm.
because that's the primary area of conflict that has to be introduced early on, and it has to be the engaging point of everything that happens in the story. Would you say that
Mm-hmm.
him as his own enemy was effective through the whole story, through just the beginning, just the end, all the way through, in the middle? What would you say?
Well, I mean, maybe it's really weak at the beginning, but because you don't really see his inner struggles till, like, later on in the
Mhm.
movie. But I would say it is fairly strong once it starts to show itself.
No, I would agree. I would say that, especially because this is the primary point of conflict for the story, it was good once it got going. But the thing is, a lot of the early
Mm-hmm.
story was all about, okay, this is what I'm choosing to do with my life. I get married to Miss K. I have kids. I
Mm-hmm.
become, and really nothing even
Mm-hmm.
starts to get going until he meets Big Al, and he's a teacher,
Mm-hmm.
and that was good. But and even then, he doesn't really start with a lot of conflict. It slowly ramps up. And so, in regards to a
Mm-hmm.
buildup of that, the him being his own enemy is not strong for I would say a good portion of the early part of the movie, and that makes it a lot harder to get that buy-in unless you've been
Mm-hmm.
willing to sit through the first 30-40 minutes.
Yeah. No, I mean, I
Mhm.
understand what you're saying. I think and honestly, I kind of agree with you a little bit, but I also kind of see some of the early stuff as essential to the conflict later on, like the things with his mother and his early family, like some of the struggles, like showing even like the obstacles between Miss K and him before they even get
Mhm.
married, like showing some of that, showing okay, there's like they did go through some stuff before they got together, and then it's just like it just adds emphasis to some of the later conflict. Like gives it like, was it really worth it to go through that to get to this
Mhm.
point? Like it kind of just creates that
No,
question.
and I
So it adds meaning for later on.
right. So I might jump a little bit ahead of here just to make the the comparison, but this movie in regards to heightened tension, where the main protagonist is thrown from a bad situation to a worse situation time after time, would you say that that was very true, not true at all, somewhere in the middle? Because this is a big section of the rating, how would you say that they did?
Um, hmm. I mean, as far as keeping the tension within the context of the story, I would say the tension is well kept for parts of it. Maybe not all the way through, but like definitely not at the beginning,
Hmm.
obviously. But I mean, especially once you start to see his downfall, like there is some tension there that kind of slowly builds until at least the car crash scene. Like until it gets to the car crash scene, like the tension keeps amping up
Right,
in a way till you get to that
right,
scene. Because it's like things are just getting worse and worse and worse until you see him after the car crash, like groveling in the mud, more or less, just like realizing that he's made a mess of his own life, that he's at the end of
yeah,
everything. So it's like you kind of like there is a lot of tension in the movie up to that
yeah,
point. So I mean maybe it slackens off after that, but like once he starts to seek to change and seek help, like that's when things maybe
sure.
loosen up
And
a
I
little.
would say that even at that end, and I know we're jumping a little bit around here, but for the sake of that whole big intersection
Mm,
where is there tension built up, the end of the movie, the transformation that occurs there is pretty quick, I would say, from where they are to him finishing the story, and then that last point of potential turning, which I will discuss at some point. But yeah, I would say that what you're saying is pretty accurate. Overall, what did you end up giving them for this point?
because it's I mean you have a scale like it's 1 to 5, 5 points for each scale
Yeah,
point,
yeah, yeah.
whatever. So I gave it like middle of the road, like I can kind of give it a 15 points kind
Okay,
of thing,
yeah.
like 15 points. Um, and I also, to be fair, another thing I did factor into it a little bit. And I don't want to. This might diss a little bit on true stories like biographical movies, where it's like you already know what's gonna happen. You kind of already know
Uh-huh.
like the ending of this movie. Like if it's following real life, you know how it's supposed to
Right.
end. So I mean, there is an aspect where it's like if you know this going into a movie, it's gonna change how you perceive some things in the story. Like, okay, you
Hmm.
know things are going to change, like certain things are going to happen. You don't know how they're gonna
Right.
happen. But so I mean, there is an aspect where it's like it did take a little bit of the tension out of it, and some probably a few
Sure.
scenes for me.
No, and
So
that makes sense. I would say that
mhm.
that's There, a good story that's even that's true is really good at
Mm-hmm.
almost pulling you out of that. I also gave this a
Mm-hmm.
middle of the road, exactly what you gave it, because I think that there was some really good things, especially later on. By the time you're getting to the darkest moments for the main protagonist, for Phil Robertson, and for the other characters in the story, it's gotten to a dark place and it's very serious.
Mm-hmm.
So there's no denying that they get to that point, but a lot of the stuff early on is rather mild. It slowly builds up, and there are some things that I thought were potential opportunities to build conflict that they didn't use. So, for example, Miss K and her father and her mother dying. While that was it was I think that's a great opportunity to build the tension in the story between the two characters. That being said, it was rather cursory because that's where they went from Phil and Miss K broke up to Phil and Miss K getting back together. And it was probably in the sum of
Mm-hmm.
2 or 3 minutes and emphasized the fact they went from together, apart, together, instead of emphasizing the pain that was in the middle of that, which I'm sure was very intense. And I think when you
Yeah.
have situations like that, it's just a missed opportunity. So there, especially because this is
Mm-hmm.
a true story, and so like
Mm-hmm.
losing family members, let alone two, in a short period of time, is no small thing to deal with. And I think that
Yeah.
that was just a missed opportunity. And so it's
Mm-hmm.
another reason why, going back to what I said earlier, because he is his own worst enemy. There wasn't enough introduction of that early on, especially when he's in football or when he's in college, and when he's courting Miss K. There's really not he doesn't really have demons to face, more or less. And I get you're getting to know
Mm-hmm.
where how he got to where he's at, but even some sort of flashback mechanism or some sort of insinuation of where his devolving into who he becomes earlier on could have pointed to that. And I'm not saying to change what actually happened in life. I'm just saying that those are different ways in which that could have been implemented. In regards to dealing with the conflict where he decides to marry Miss K and start this life that he's more or less dreamed of, the is there an ideal that he stands for? Something that maybe transcends the situation and makes it the right
Hmm.
thing to do.
I mean, I would kind of, because of the nature of this story, I would kind of want to say yes. Um, and just because, I mean, he does change as a character. He does
Mm-hmm.
change. Like he does change from like being selfish and prideful and stubborn to being like he changes and like and becomes saved, becomes a Christian. Like there is this like you see this character arc. So he becomes a better off person by the end, morally and
Mm-hmm.
spiritually, because of everything he went
Right.
through. And as a theme, I guess you could say like, I mean, I don't want to say maybe it's a little harder to pinpoint what he is exactly, but it's just like uh but you could definitely see like a thematic element to the
Mm-hmm.
story through his struggle. So like I don't know, like maybe what did I write down? Like I get one idea I wrote down, like maybe redemption is found at the end of
Mm-hmm.
oneself.
Right.
Like
Well, and
more or
that
less is
might
like
be
maybe
is
a
that more of a
theme.
theme than his that maybe than what he stands for? Because those are.
That's probably more. That's more of a theme for the movie than an ideal of what
Mhm.
he stands for. Like to pin an ideal to him, that's a little harder to put down.
Sure.
Like because I think I mean unless he's like every man or something, I don't know. Like he's a symbolic. Like if you're gonna put symbolism on him, maybe like symbolic of every man's journey.
Hmm.
Like
Yeah.
so, I guess you could say that, but yeah, I don't know what else you would put as an ideal
Sure.
for
Well,
his
so for
character.
myself, because I do think it's helpful to have it written down. Otherwise, it's like, oh,
Mm-hmm.
does he stand for something that transcends time? Like, you have characters such as Frodo who stands for some level of perseverance in the midst of evil, and you
Mm-hmm.
then, which is a very clear example, in my opinion. But then you have characters like Phil Robertson, and you have to ask, does he stand for something on his own? And I believe so. I think there's either this idea of hope or change, specifically in like breaking the
Hmm.
patterns in family life, where
Hmm.
um he's stands for let's try to make the world a better place by doing it, living my life the way I ought to live it. And so, whether that's an
Hmm.
embodiment clearly of hope or change, I think that at least he's taking a stab at that. And it's a little harder to decipher just
Hmm.
because he's literally his own worst enemy. And so, seeking change while being the own obstacle to your change is a hard thing. But at the same time, like you just said, we
Hmm.
are our own worst enemies when it comes to change in our own lives. So when you're saying every man's struggle, that's 100% correct, because every man's struggle is facing your demons and becoming a better
Hmm.
person and rising out of your situation, right?
Hmm.
So yeah, is the main character's goal something worthy of pursuing and significant for his life, specifically for him? Is it a big deal? Or is he fighting for small pennies?
No, I would say it'd be a bigger deal because you are fighting for the future. Like he is like fighting for
Mm-hmm.
his family, more or less. He's fighting for, in a way, like it's the children in the family who pass on to the next generation, who raise the next generation. So it's like whoever you teach your children and whatever you teach the next generation, that's what they're going to pass on to the
Mm-hmm.
next generation. Like whether good or bad, whether it be like the how you treat them, like they're going to take that and it's going to impress how they raise the next
Right.
generation, more or less. So I mean, there is an aspect where it's like it's not really small pennies if you think about it, because it's like this is how chain of events start through generations and families, where it's like you. So it's like he's fighting for. It does matter on a certain
Yeah.
level.
No, yeah, I agree 100%. And
Mm-hmm.
I said yes for that. So both of those, I would say this is really where the movie does shine, is the values and the
Mm-hmm.
ideals that it presents are very strong, and it adds a lot to the movie because you have that aspect dialed in pretty freaking well. You look like you want to say something.
I just realized why my score was like a little low. I just realized there was no points at the end of one of my questions and I didn't factor it in.
uh,
So my score is actually a little higher
okay,
than what I had said.
nice. Well, we'll get that revised one by the end for sure. Make sure you guys stay till the end to get that. Until
I just claim it as, oh, I convinced him to change his mind.
it's funny. All right. So, was in regards to this movie, it's all about personal transformation, right? And was there
Mhm.
something in the movie, some sort of revelation that occurred that changes everything?
Well, I guess for his character, in a way, him becoming a Christian is a revelation, where like him finding
Mm-hmm.
Jesus, like that does change his character. Um, that does. So I guess in a way that is a transformation, a um something like not unexpected, but like changes
Right.
everything, I guess. Um
I,
I don't know if like as far as storytelling goes, I don't know if it's like a strong enough revelation to be like I don't know, like it's not like a world is it like a world shattering revelation? I don't know.
there's a difference between the knockout ending and the any
Mhm.
revelation which changes what comes before it. So that's true. I
Mhm.
think if you want to get more nuanced, there's no surprise. There's no revelations that occur. There is revelations that occur which do change everything, but it's not a surprise to you necessarily, especially if you're familiar with the genre
Mhm.
or with the type of story being told. And then there's genuinely shocking revelations that do change everything. Luke, I am your father type stuff.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
I mean, if you want to break that down,
I mean, I guess
go
maybe
ahead.
I mean the only other revelation I could think of is when he realizes that he's becoming his mom. Like that moment
Mm-hmm.
when he has that flashback when he realizes, "Oh wait, I'm becoming the very thing I didn't want to
Yeah,
be."
you have become the very
So,
thing you swore to destroy. Don't
yeah.
lecture me, Obi-Wan. All right, so the I would say, yeah, I would say technically, if you're at all familiar with the Christian orthodoxy on salvation, this is nothing new. He realizes he cannot save himself, and that hope is from an outside source. He cannot make change in his own life by himself. It happens by someone outside of him, that being in the character Jesus Christ from the Bible. So that is definitely taking the ideal and turning it on its head in some ways, where, oh, I will be the author of change and make sure this doesn't happen. Well, you can't be the author of your own change. It's the message of the story. You need an outside person in the person of Jesus to change you. So that revelation in regards to a story point does exist. It is significant. If you're familiar with the Bible at all, that's not really surprising to you, but it does change everything in the story. So it needs to be noted.
Mm-hmm.
And you're absolutely right.
Yeah.
Did you think there was a not surprise ending?
If there was a surprise ending, I completely missed it.
Yeah.
Like it flew over my head. It'd be like, what just happened?
And this is, especially if you've seen Duck Dynasty, you're going to know that everything turns out fine, because they made multiple seasons of a show based off this family. So clearly, and he was in it, so was Miss Kay. So, there's no surprise there. I mean, you don't need a knockout surprise ending to make a good story.
Mm-hmm.
That being said, better stories do have it. Yeah. So, yeah. Anyways, does Phil Robertson grow as a person in this story after going through this whole situation?
I thought we answered this question, but
yeah,
yes.
I mean, I guess that's true. I probably could just skip that. I'm just going through the notes. Come on. I don't want to miss anything. Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. We did talk about this. He's that's the whole point of this story. And so, does he face his demons and overcome them at the end? Yes, the very nature of this entire adventure is that he does become a better person at the end. So I know I spoke the ideals, and we might have already covered the idea of a theme. What did you say that your theme was for this?
I guess in a way, like the best way to summarize is like you find redemption at the end of your own self, more or less. Like when you get to the end of your own rope, that's when you find redemption.
Right. The idea of this is definitely there's a theme here, and the theme is that you can't save yourself. Hope and change is found outside of oneself, and specifically, it's in Jesus Christ. That's the idea of the story, and so it's frankly the gospel presentation in a story. He didn't need that little gospel presentation at the end in addition to this, because that was literally the entire story was that gospel presentation. So if you believe in Christianity, then this definitely is what you believe summed up in a movie, and that transformation occurring. So very strong on the themes, very strong on the values and ideals that are presented, and it's pretty good at presenting those parts of it. So for closing it up, did you think this movie left you with a desire to watch the next one? Did it leave you satisfied? Did it leave you unsatisfied? How did you feel?
I'd say it left me satisfied. I think the movie as a whole, like it was well, it rounded everything off. The character arcs were clearly shown. Like we had good themes. Like I was perhaps a little bit more than satisfied. I mean, obviously there wasn't going to be like a second one or something. Like it's just a standalone movie, but it's like I was happy with the experience. It's like
happy.
Yeah,
happy. Yeah, the movie. I think the people who were sitting in the back of the theater liked it a lot more than I did. I liked it. It was good, but they were saying, "Oh, you crying?" And I was crying. I'm like, okay, cool, good for you. No, I wasn't crying, but it was a good story to be told. It left me satisfied. I'm glad I watched it. That kind of thing was all the sentiments I was taking away from it. There was no unsatisfaction with it, but I'm also not expecting a sequel or looking forward to a sequel, and that just makes sense considering the movie.
Well, I guess another thing to be said is like, and maybe this is like, I don't want to bash on the Christian genre of movies, but like there's a lot of them out there that are just poorly made, poorly written. Like clearly the attempt is just to get a gospel message in front of people, and it's like most of the time it's just Christians watching these movies anyway. So it's like okay, whatever. But it's like this movie clearly had more intention behind it. There's more to the story. So I appreciated this movie more than other Christian movies in some regards, because this one stands apart from others. Like, okay, this one had more effort in it. The story was better crafted, perhaps, than some of these other ones out there. So
no, I would agree. I would say that sometimes people defend Christian movies because they're Christian movies and they are part of that group of people. And that's not what I think you should do. You should hold people to a high standard and say, write the best story possible. Now, when it's biographical, you're a little more limited with that. And I would say that the story was still worthy of being told, and they told it pretty solidly overall. So yeah, that's a good takeaway. Would you? So overall, you gave the movie a 5.25. How would you still?
I got 5.2 before, but I think after realizing my score's off, I think my score is going to be 5.7.
Okay. So another half.
So that's actually my final score.
There you go. No, I think I will leave mine where it is. I think it's still at a good spot. I am curious where we had the discrepancies.
Well, I think it's also only out of 9 points too. So like that's a pretty average score. That's not a bad score for any movie. Like anything over a 5 for us, that's a decent score for a movie.
Yeah. No, it's definitely worth a watch. I would say that it's a solid story to be told. I wouldn't say it's my favorite movie at all, but I'm sorry, Phil, you're not Christopher Nolan. Just kidding. I hate Christopher Nolan. Oh gosh. Okay. Anyways,
he gets a pass for Inception. Everything else.
Inception and Interstellar. Come on, where are you at? Actually,
Interstellar. It's like I haven't seen The Prestige, so I can't say that.
Prestige. I mean, Dark Knight. I'm just saying.
Okay. Fine.
Let's just say.
Okay, fine.
Think about it. Inception, Interstellar, Dark Knight Rises, Prestige. Clearly, Christopher Nolan sucks. Yeah. And I think that
obviously
where we're gonna leave it. That's the pod. We hope you guys all enjoyed. If you're watching this, thank you for watching. We will see all of you next time for The Hateful Eight. See you then.